Matt Kleiderman is kindly doing for us. So I believe on the call we have Helen and Kumar from GSK. We have Matt, Lauren, and Robin from CCC, or ICSIS. We have Helmi, Michael, and Michael from UBVI. Is there anyone I've missed at this point? And sorry, Ralph from ACS. Okay, that's it. So thank you very much. Just a couple of logistics. If you wouldn't mind, if those of you are coming in through the WebEx, if you could just mute yourself while you're not talking. I suggest, I'll go through the agenda items in a minute. I suggest that we stop after each of the sessions and allow for questions. If you prefer just to send a question via message, then send it directly to me through the chat option on the right-hand side of the screen. The webinar is really intended to be a closing webinar as we come to the end of the corporate pilot of RA21. Thanks to all of you pilot participants who have been working with us for at least the last 18 months. And we really appreciate your input. So today we just wanted to use the opportunity to update you on a number of items. So firstly, Ralph Youngen of ACS is going to give us an update on the overall RA21 initiative. Many of the items are all coming together at this stage, so what's happening in the overall initiative is important for all of us. I'm then going to cover some of the developments in the corporate pilot, very specifically the granular usage stats, the PDR federation, and then Ralph is going to talk further about the UX developments and hopefully show us some of the developments based on the feedback we received from you and from others during the testing. And then finally, Helen has kindly agreed to just do a brief outline of the next steps. But before we start with Ralph, I'm just going to welcome Anita, who's just joined us. Is there anyone else who's just come in? Anita from GSK. No. Okay, Ralph, if we can hand over to you.
Sure, thanks, Jenny. So I haven't included a lot of background material on RA21 because I think we've been together for some time now and you all know what the initiative is about, but I did include here just a reminder of what some of the overarching goals of the initiative are, and that is that we've been working on testing improved solutions for scholarly access through a number of different pilots that are going on, have been going on, and I will talk about the results of each of those pilots. We will soon be moving into writing some best practices documentation for user experience that will go through the NISO recommended practice process. We hope to have that go through that process before the end of the year and actually have a official NISO recommended practice come out of that. And then we are also, a new goal that was added a few months ago as well, we are in the process of identifying potential third parties that can operate the necessary centralized infrastructure that is going to be required in order to make the user experience work across publishers for RA21. So those are the primary goals that we're working against here. So again, as a reminder, we've had 3 different pilots working. This corporate pilot, as well as 2 pilots that were testing different implementation approaches, one called P3W and one called Wave Cloud. And then we had 2 overarching work streams that really crossed the boundaries of all of the pilots. One is around user experience, and I will, as Jenny mentioned, I will talk a fair amount later in this webinar about where we are with our user experience development. And another pilot that was focusing on privacy and security matters across the different pilots as well. So the end result is shown here. The work of the pilots, if you look kind of vertically, the work of the pilots is largely been concluded now. Jenny will give us an update on where we are with our corporate pilot work, and I have that queued up on the next slide. But we have a document that is being distributed that talks about the results of the 2 academic pilots that focused on the different technical architectures that could be used in order to enable the RA21 user experience. The end result of that is that what we're calling the P3W architecture was the one that was selected as the architecture to move forward with. And that was largely driven by the deliverable that came out of the privacy and security work group. That privacy and security recommendations is under review right now by our steering committee and will be ready for distribution in just another week or two. And largely, that report was done with chief information security officers from a number of the different participants under RA21. And they looked at the two architectures, at the Wave Cloud and P3W architecture, and what we found was that the Wave Cloud architecture imposed a bit more obligation on behalf of the third party that will be hosting the infrastructure for RA21, meaning that it allowed some information to be stored centrally in the cloud. And even though that information was not high value information, it was simply, you know, remembering what your previous identity provider was on a browser by browser basis. Even though it's low value, it would subject that third-party provider to GDPR obligations, for example, for you know, right to be forgotten or for data inquiries. And it was largely because of that additional obligation on the privacy side that we chose the P3W architecture. And just by point of comparison, P3W simply stores your previous identity provider choice in your local browser, storage. So nothing is being stored in a central location. And that was really why we went with that architecture. The other point of that is that when we looked at the two architectures, we found that the user experience was, there were no detriments or benefits one versus the other in terms of the user experience that we wanted to enable. So that's how that decision was made. And then, as I said, I'll talk quite a bit more about user experience in a moment. I guess I'll pause there and ask if there are any questions before Jenny goes on to give the corporate pilot report. Okay, hearing none. Jenny, do you want to go forward with this?
Sure. Thanks very much, Ralph. So I'm just going to go through some of the corporate pilot developments based on these original goals that we had. So firstly, validation of SAML infrastructure, then the user experience, specification for granular usage stats, and the formation of a PDR federation. So I'll just go briefly through each of these. In the early days of our pilot, you may remember that we did a survey, in fact, in the days when we were still called the URA, and that indicated the adoption of federated management and the use of SAML by many of you, by many of the PDR companies. But although that was the case, this had largely not been used by these companies for accessing scholarly information resources. So we undertook a baseline SAML integration test in which each of the PDR pilot participants successfully tested the SAML integration with, I think it was with Elsevier and Springer Nature. For the purpose of this test, we agreed that the pilot participants would use 4 attributes that would be exchanged. And for that, we used the first name of the user, last name of the user, unique ID, and the email address. But as part of that process, we also identified 2 potential additional attributes that may be required by some of the PDR companies. So the first was to identify internal company users from contracted third-party users, so that some people need to manage differentiated access rights for the publishers. And the second was to identify a user's departmental affiliation in cases where departmental billing is used. For those, I have been advised that, that one of the many attribute schemas in the world today, something called the INET org person, could be used effectively for this. Apparently this is supported out of the box by most directory services such as Active Directory and Open LDAP. And what this does is it includes attributes for department number and also for employee type. So employee type could be employer versus contractor and so on. I understand that this is one of the most ubiquitous schemas, and it's used across sectors. So Heather Flanagan, who we work with, who's been managing the academic pilots, is well versed in SAML attributes and federations, and that's the route that we're currently pursuing. Although it wasn't identified at the time of the SAML test, a further attribute is needed in order for publishers to generate the granular usage reports that were required by the PDR. But I'll say a little bit more about this when I talk specifically about the granular usage reporting. So the second item I want to cover, and in fact the most important item and key goal of the corporate pilot, was to improve the user experience. And indeed, this was the main objective of the RA21 in general. Many of you have been involved in the 2 rounds, at least, that we've had of UX testing, and for which many thanks. And Ralph's going to go into a lot more detail about that shortly. So that brings me to the granular usage reporting. Many of you will know that the counter statistics, which is the industry standard for publisher reports, doesn't actually cater for the granular usage reporting at the department or individual user level. A number of you wanted more granular usage reporting, and the publishers participating in the corporate pilot were willing to engage on how best to provide such reports. And they proposed a way forward that relied on the use of a specific SAML attribute that would be communicated. And then depending on whether this was populated by a company at the department level or the user level or not populated at all, then the publishers could employ a single reporting mechanism that would cater for all the different needs. There no existing suitable SAML attribute was identified that could be used for this. And so a proposal has been made to the REFEDS community, that's the community that sets the standards for federations, for the addition of an attribute that they're proposing calling the local reporting code. This has been specified and is currently out for voting by the REFEDS community, and we should shortly have confirmation either on its acceptance or an indication of what amendments are required. And once this attribute has been confirmed, then a test could be done between one or more of the PDR communities in terms of passing this attribute to the publishers. And once publishers are receiving that attribute, ultimately they'll be able to provide the necessary granular usage stats. The fourth item, and very much a secondary objective of the corporate pilot, was the investigation into the possible formation of a PDR federation. An access management federation would make the proposed RA21, the whole RA21 ecosystem work well without requiring individual communication set up between each company and each publisher. With the federation, the metadata exchange would all be done with one entity, i.e. the federation, and this would apply both to the companies sharing their metadata and the publishers sharing their metadata. Over the last few months, I've spoken with a number of existing federations around the world, and in principle, all would be willing to engage with PDR in setting up a specific federation for the community. Most of the consortia I spoke to are academic consortia, but I also spoke with a couple of global ones that already operate and have some customers, indeed, in the pharma space. And you might recall that last year, GSK set up a test with the JISC UK Access Management Federation. Unfortunately, this was not very successful given some issues between the GSK's Ping Federate SSO and JISC. And the net result of that was that GSK would have needed to work with each publisher on setup, and that effectively defeats one of the key advantages of a federation. However, a couple of months ago, GSK did a test with the Open Athens Federation, and I know a number of you are familiar with that. In this case, the setup was very quick and simple, and a successful test was done using Open Athens Federation with Wiley and Elsevier and Springer Nature. Open Athens seems to me to be a potential viable option for a PDR-specific federation for a number of reasons. Firstly, there are already 6 PDR companies using Open Athens. Secondly, this is a federation that already supports global users. And thirdly, the federation itself provides some usage statistics to its members as part of the overall package. Just note that a number of you have, I know, had some testing with Open Athens in the past and were unhappy with their user experience. But this test with the proposal for using Open Athens or another federation is that only the federation infrastructure in the case of Open Athens would be used and not the current UX. The UX would be the RA21 UX as deployed by each publisher, and you'll hear more about that from Ralph in a minute. So while it's feasible to work for each PDR company to work with each publisher directly rather than going via federation, this becomes extremely onerous when you have a number of publishers to whom you subscribe. It's also a very large overhead for the publishers to deal directly with each company. We now have quite a bit of information about federations, and further discussion will be needed by the PDR community on the issue of a PDR federation in order to take this forward. So those are the 4 areas I've covered. Are there any questions on any of those? I take it not. We can always come back to any questions related to this at the end, towards the end of the session. So Ralph, I'll hand back to you.
Okay. Thanks, Jenny. All right, so at this point, I am going to attempt to do a live demo of where we are with our user experience development. So, can you confirm that you can see my web browser now?
It's gray for me.
It's gray for me too.
Oh, that's not good. All right, share application, Google Chrome.
Now I can.
Now. Okay.
Me too.
All right. Okay, great. Okay, so this is a live working prototype that we have that demonstrates the RA21 user experience. And some of you may have seen this in the past, but I'm going to run through it and then show you some enhancements that we're making to it and show you the direction that we're hoping to take this in the next round. This is simulating a Google Scholar search, and as we all know, researchers might use any discovery tool that they want, but no matter what discovery tool they use, they typically come up with a list of articles of interest from different publishers. So in this case, the first publisher is Elsevier, and the second link here is from ProQuest, and the third link is from the ACS. And so if I click on the first link here and go to the Elsevier site, what we are building is a call to action like this here that says access through your institution that would be consistent across all publisher sites. And so if I click on that access through your institution link, I would go to a site where I would need to search for my institution. And that could be done either with your institution name or your email address. So if I type Glaxo, I can find the institution name that way, or if I type gsk.com, I also find the institution in the same way. And so I would click on my institution and come to my institution login page. And I think Helen has actually tried this and validated that she was able to log in with her GSK credentials, and it works just fine. Since I don't have access to GSK, I will choose a different institution that I actually do have access through. We have a test institution for RA21 that is hosted by Open Athens, actually. And so once I sign in through that institution, I now have the ability to download a PDF from Elsevier. So once I've accomplished that, if I go back to Google Scholar and go to the second link for ProQuest, and again click on Access through your institution, it remembered that I had logged in through this test institution in the past, and so all I have to do is click and I have access now because I already had a session over on that Open Athens site. I didn't have to log in again, and now I have the ability to download a PDF. Similarly, if I go to the ACS site, I see that same call to action. I click, it remembered my previous institution, I click there, and now I have access to download the article. So that is the user experience that we have in terms of the prototype today. Now, a couple of things that we are building to improve this situation. If I go back here. Sorry, let me get back to it. I might actually have to go to it. What I want to show you is something that Helen suggested that we work on, and that is the ability to pre-configure the environment with a so that corporate users don't have to go through this discovery process. And so I have a bookmarklet here that I can execute, and you'll see that it automatically put Glaxo's site into my browser for me so that I didn't have to go through that institutional search. And similarly, just to show you that how this works, if I clear that out, and I also can preload BASF with this bookmarklet, and you'll see that it preloaded the BASF site. So this is an idea that we've been working on with Helen and with Matt from CCC a bit on how to make this work. And the idea that we have is that we would either be able to instruct your corporate IT departments on how to push the necessary code out to your corporate browsers on your corporate machines to preload your site into this environment, since this is just purely a browser storage issue, or that we would be able to provide you with a link, a URL that is specific to your company that you could send out perhaps in email, to the researchers that are typically interacting with scholarly literature. So they could simply click on that link and basically get their browser already kind of seeded into the RA21 environment so that they would never have to go through the search process. Once that is installed like that, then when you do searching, it doesn't matter where you start from, it is always going to come up as BASF, and so you're always going to be able to, you never have to go through that discovery process where you have to look up your institution. So I'm showing you that it's possible. It's absolutely possible to make that work, and we will continue to find the best way to make that work. The other thing that I want to show you is a vision on where we are going in the future in terms of what we're calling the next level of integration for this environment. This is not a working prototype. This is just a clickable screen-oriented prototype that I can show you. But this is what we're shooting for to put into code very soon. So once again, I'm starting from Google Scholar. In this case, I'm going back to ProQuest, where since this is my first time through, I have to, again, search for my institution. And once I have that login occurring, now I have the ability to download a PDF. But the second time, once I have that installed in my browser, this is the kind of user experience that we want to enable. So that on the publisher site, it says right here how you logged in previously. So in this case, I had just logged in through GlaxoSmithKline, and on the publisher site, it says right here, access through GlaxoSmithKline. The benefit of doing it this way is it cuts down on the number of clicks. All I have to do is click that link, and now I have access to the article. That is the user experience that we are really shooting for. This is a more sophisticated technical user experience. It requires more APIs in order to make that happen, but that is the user experience that we are now working with the developers on and going to be implementing and hope to be able to test very soon. Okay, that was the end result of what I wanted to show, and let me pause once again and ask if there are any questions about the user experience. Okay, hearing none, Jenny or Helen, I'll turn it back to you.
Yes, done a good job there, Ralph. Thank you. Helen, do you want to pick up here and talk about some of the next steps for the RA21 or for PDR participants?
Okay,
yeah.
thank you, Jenny. So as we've heard, RA21 is an ongoing activity. So there are really three areas I wanted to highlight as next steps. The first of these is that the corporate report is kindly being written up by Jenny, and that will give a summary of all the work we've done through the corporate pilot, and we're hoping to have that available by the end of July. The second area I'd like to highlight is further testing of the user experience. I'm sure you'd agree it's a really important aspect of delivering this change. So the RA21 program would very much value our continued input into further refining the user experience. And then finally, I'm very pleased to let you know that we're taking the opportunity of showcasing the RA21 corporate pilot at the 60th anniversary of the PDR in Vienna in September. This session will be led by Tracy Armstrong, the CEO and President of the CCC, Ralph Youngen, who we've heard from today from the ACS, and myself representing GSK and the PDR. And working together, our three organisations have acted as the sponsors for this corporate pilot of RA21. So hopefully these steps will add to an increased interest and enthusiasm to make the necessary changes that we need to make over the coming years. So thank you very much, and back to Jenny.
Thanks, Helen. I just want to clarify one thing, and that is I hope to complete the corporate pilot myself by the end of this month, so you probably can expect to see it sometime during early August. But I'll get it out as soon as we can to all of you. Let me just go back and ask if there are any specific questions on any of the areas that we've covered today. No? Okay. Well, thank you all. We will have a recording of this, thanks to Matt, and we'll make that available to all of you and those who are unable to attend today in the next few days. But I just want to take this opportunity to thank you all very much for participating in the URA and then RA21 over the past 18 months or so, and providing us with all your valuable input. And I wish you all success as you go forward with implementing the ultimate recommendations of the RA21. So thank you to everyone involved, and thanks Ralph and Helen for your presentations today. So thank you all.
Okay, thank you for your leadership, Jenny.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.